Microsoft just announced Windows 11. Seattle's hitting the record high temperature of 100 degrees. We are not going to talk about those today. It is the Delegate that we're going to talk about. Hello and welcome to Code with Sar. I'm Sar. How are you doing? This is the third episode in the series of Build a Library with me. We talk all about those technologies that we use to build the library for JWT Authentication. The first episode introduced the library as well as the technologies used. We talked about extension methods in the last one, and we're going to focus on Delegate this time. In this episode, we're going to talk about what is the Delegate and how to use it. What are those pre-existing delegates, like an action of T, function of T, things like that. Then we'll use a simple example to illustrate why Delegate is useful. And toward the end of the topic, I'm going to show you how Delegate is applied in our JWT Authentication library and the design considerations around it. Let's begin. So what is a delegate? Just like a class in C#, delegate is a type, and it represents a reference to methods. It also specifies the signature of the method. For example, what kind of parameter list the method has to have, and the return type of the method. Let's take a look at how to define a delegate. Let's start with the keyword of delegate. And then just think about yourself of writing a method. Like the return type is void, the delegate name is my first delegate, and there is an integer parameter. Okay, this defines the type of delegate. Just like a class, we can have instances. For example, and this instance now can be assigned with methods that match the signature. Let me start by create a method. Notice this method takes in an integer as a parameter and returns void. That matches the signature defined in my first delegate. Hence, it is allowed to be assigned to underscore my first delegate instance. Now I can invoke the instance of the delegate. Let's see how it runs. Other than method, there are some other formats that a delegate will take in. For example, an anonymous method. It starts with a keyword, happen to be delegate, takes in an integer, and returns void. And if we run it, and the third way is to use a lambda expression. Let's run this one. So method, anonymous method, or lambda expression. What they have in common is that they share the same signature, meaning same parameter list and the same return type. Now that we know what is a delegate, let's take a look at some delegates that is provided by C#. And they are action, action of T, and function of T. Action is a delegate with no parameter and returns void. Action of T is actually a family of delegates. We could have multiple generic parameters. Each T maps to a parameter type, and the return type is void. Function of T is very similar, except the last parameter will be used as a type for return. These are very useful delegates. With these in place, we hardly need our own delegates. For example, my first delegate takes in an integer and returns void. That could be replaced with the action of integer. As you can see, this is very convenient. We as code author do not have to define these delegates. And the callers will always understand how to use it in forms of action of integer. I think that is the reason why nowadays in C# code, action T and function of T is so widely used. Oh, by the way, there is another less known delegate that is a predicate of T. This one takes in one parameter for criteria check and always return a boolean. I mention this because I hope when the time you see it, don't be surprised by it and just see it through. It's just yet another predefined delegate. Okay, now we all know what is a delegate. Let's talk about why do we need it. To explain that, let's take a look at another example. What you're seeing here is a number printer. To print a number 100. Okay, Not very sexy, right? As a developer, intuitively, we would want to parameterize the number to be printed. So we will update our code like this. Still, nothing fancy. Now, let's update the requirement a little bit. Let's say we want to print double of the number. We will update the code like this. Okay, then how about half of the number? You do this. Now, change it to square of the number. Have you get enough of it? An ultimate solution to this kind of always changing requirement is to allow the caller to make the call. Just like we add a parameter to allow the number to be changed by the caller, we can parameterize the preprocessor of the number as well. A preprocessor is an algorithm, and that could be abstracted as a method that takes in an integer and returns an integer. Let's see how we update the code. To consume the number printer, we will firstly need to create an instance of it. Then we call the print method. In this case, we would expect that 100 is the doubled before printing. Let's see how it runs. Without changing the code of number printer, I could use that to output half of the number as well. Let's pause and think about the logic behind the scene. That delegate on print method allows the caller to pass in a method. So there are actually two parties, the number printer and the caller. The number printer is very focused on putting whatever the number that has been pre-processed onto the screen. It delegates the responsibility of a pre-processed number to the caller, and that makes the number printer single responsibility. And single responsibility principle, aka SRP, is a very important design principle. It makes the class simple, effective, and easy to test, and there are just tons of goodies. And the delegate makes the separation of the responsibility easy. Going back to the JWT Authentication library, for the method of add JWT Auth, it is responsible for creating an JWT Auth options from the configuration. And then there's a second responsibility. That is for the user to override whatever is already in the options. For that purpose, I put a delegate as a parameter for add JWT Auth method. This delegate takes in the JWT Auth options parameter. So when the caller supplies a method to handle it, it will be able to manipulate JWT Auth options. Now let's check out the caller. In this piece of user's code, by calling the extension method of add JWT Auth, the caller assigns a lambda here to customize the option of JWT authentication. And this is a real-life example of how delegate is used. The library created an option and delegated it to the end user to customize it. If you are writing the library, this is one way to allow the user to chime in for options. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And I also hope this one gives you some thinking around the delegates. Leave a comment to let me know. I plan to have more topics like this. Subscribe if you find it useful. Give me a thumb up because you can. I also want to say thank you to those who helped me with this video. Keep coding, keep improving. I'll see you in the next one. Till then, take care.